Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 12. Sigma as grammatical boundary. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. We are in Episode 8, the pure abstract language. We have completed our journey through the abstract alphabet and syntax. We have met derivatives as pure letters, J infinity Saif as the complete local dictionary, and the grammar hierarchy that tells us how those letters can be combined into coherent sentences. Now we enter a new and profound book, Book 8.4, Abstract Topology, Knotting the Language. Here we explore not just how phi speaks, but where its speech must stop, bend, or tear. Today we meet the first topological concept in this abstract language, sigma as the grammatical boundary of smooth speech. I invite you to stay with this slowly. Everything we discuss is still purely abstract. We are not yet talking about black holes or particles or cracks in real materials. We are defining the shape of speakability of the phi language itself. Sigma is the symbol we will use for the set of points where the smooth language of derivatives can no longer be spoken. The limits of smooth speech. Imagine you are telling a beautiful, continuous story. Your sentences flow seamlessly, each word leading gently to the next, each paragraph connected by natural transitions. The listener feels carried along by a smooth river of thought. But then, you come to a place in the story where that smoothness is impossible. No matter how you try to phrase it, the event you want to describe will not fit into the same style. Your words stutter, your grammar buckles, and you're forced to stop, reset, or change register completely. You have reached the linguistic boundary. In the phi language, our story is told with smooth derivatives, infinite towers of change questions, each one assuming that phi itself is differentiable. We have built a whole universe of concepts: omega, k, v, alpha, curvature, j infinity phi, integrability conditions, all resting on the idea that phi is smooth enough for these derivatives to exist. But what if, at some places, phi simply cannot be described as smooth, no matter how cleverly we choose our coordinates or labels? What if there are points, lines, or surfaces where our entire grammatical machinery, our derivatives, our constraint relations, our integrability checks, simply fails? The abstract name for the collection of all such problematic points is sigma, the sigma set. Sigma is where smooth grammar cannot be written. It is not simply where phi is very large or where some quantity blows up in value. Instead, sigma marks where phi's behavior is such that no smooth coordinate system, no relabeling of space and time, can make it look differentiable in the usual sense. Derivatives there are undefined, contradictory, or path-dependent. At sigma, the tapestry of phi has a genuine tear, not just a sharp fold that can be unfolded by a clever trick, but a place where the threads end, knot, or tangle beyond smooth repair. Linguistic role, the unwritable marks. In our language metaphor, sigma is like an unwritable mark on the page. Not a comma, not a full stop, not a question mark, but a rip in the paper itself. Most of reality's story, in this abstract view, is written in smooth, flowing cursive. Derivative questions apply everywhere, and the answers vary continuously. We can talk about how phi changes and how that change changes to any order we like. Sigma points are where the pen tip breaks or the paper itself is torn away. They are not part of the grammatical structure of sentences, they are boundaries of sentence structure. You can think of sigma as the edge of speakability. On one side of sigma, the phi language speaks in the dialect of smooth calculus, derivatives, gradients, curvatures, and all the beautiful machinery of J-Menity phi. On the other side, that dialect cannot be used. The language may switch to another mode or simply fall silent. At this stage, we do not decide what happens beyond sigma. We simply mark it as the border where smooth syntax stops being valid. These are purely abstract punctuation marks. They are grammatical, not yet physical. We are not saying sigma is a black hole or sigma is a particle. We are saying if the universe has places where smooth description fails, then sigma is the symbol in our language that collects and names those places. It is the concept that says, here, the story of smooth derivatives cannot be continued. 3. Scientific essence, the question of smoothness. What does sigma really ask about phi? It asks a deeper question than how fast are you changing or how curved are you here? Those are derivative questions that already assume smoothness. Sigma asks, where does the very possibility of asking derivative questions break down? This question has a beautiful triple echo. In the time echo, a sigma point in time would be like a hard boundary of description. It would be a moment beyond which the smooth timeline of phi cannot be extended in one direction. Not just a dramatic event, but an actual edge for the differential story, an event horizon for smooth calculus. You can approach that moment from one side and describe what happens with derivatives, but you cannot continue smoothly through it. In the space echo, a sigma curve or surface in space behaves like a defect line or a wall. Across that line, phi cannot be smoothly connected. A simple picture is a sheet of paper with a cut. On each side of the cut, the paper is perfectly smooth, but along the cut itself, there is no way to define a smooth surface. In continuous fields, sigma plays a similar role. You might walk around a point in space and discover that the phase of phi wins and wins until you cannot assign a single value consistently everywhere. That obstruction is a sign of sigma. In the motion echo, the motion of sigma points themselves traces out world lines or world surfaces of grammatical discontinuity. They are paths in spacetime along which the rules of smooth propagation fracture. Around them, waves may scatter, twist, or be trapped. Along them, our usual language of take the derivative and evolve forward fails and must be replaced by something else. Sigma, then, is the abstract map of where our smooth, derivative-based description, our entire language so far, reaches its inherent limits. 4. Position in the master tree, where no branch can grow. In the master tree picture, phi at each smooth point is the trunk. The first derivatives are the main branches, higher derivatives are smaller branches and twigs, and J infinity phi is the full crown of structure at that point. Constraint relations are the vines and supports that connect nearby branches. Closure tells us we can always grow more twigs from any existing branch. Integrability conditions check whether the whole crown really belongs to one trunk. Where does sigma sit in this picture? It does not sit on a branch at all. Sigma is the place where no tree can grow. Sigma is like a patch of bare rock or a sheer cliff in the landscape. Everywhere else, the soil allows a tree of derivatives to take root, to sprout a trunk, phi, and branches, its derivatives. At sigma, the soil itself is missing. There is nowhere for phi's smooth trunk to stand. There is no well-defined phi from which to sprout derivatives. The entire hierarchy of G infinity phi collapses there, not because the values are large, but because the structure needed to define them is absent. The boundary of the region where the tree can grow is shaped by sigma. It tells us the outline of those portions of spacetime where the holophase language can be expressed in smooth form. In that sense, sigma is like the outline of a continent on a map. Inside the outline, you can walk on land and follow roads. Outside it, you are in the ocean, where those particular paths do not exist. 5. Relations to neighbors, where integrability fails. Sigma relates to everything we have built so far by being their natural limit. Our entire alphabet of derivatives is built on the assumption of differentiability. Our constraint relations assume that mixed derivatives agree, that certain combinations vanish, that structure is compatible. Our integrability conditions check whether a large, tangled collection of derivative values can truly come from one underlying phi. Sigma marks where those assumptions and conditions fail in a structural way. If you try to integrate derivatives around a small loop that encircles a sigma point, you will generally find a contradiction. The integrability condition will not close. The loop integral will not vanish. Some quantity will return with a jump. That is the abstract way sigma reveals itself, as a failure of integrability, a signal that the supposedly smooth field has a hidden tear. You can also see sigma as the complement of well-behavedness. The region outside sigma is where all our previous tools, J-infinity phi, closure under differentiation, formal grammar hierarchy, are valid. Sigma is everything that must be excluded to make those tools consistent. A complete language needs both the rules for forming sentences and the concept of where sentences cannot be formed at all. Sigma supplies that second ingredient. If you want to see the rigorous mathematical side of this, how sigma appears as a singularity set in jet space, and how such sets can be classified, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo. There you will find the scientific papers that support this audio journey. Semantic meaning, the organizer of smooth domains. The work sigma does is subtle but profound. By defining where smooth description breaks, it also defines where smooth description works. In other words, sigma organizes the world into domains of smooth speakability. Within each domain, each open region that does not intersect sigma, phi can be written as a smooth function. There, derivatives of all orders can be taken, the full grammar of the holophase language can operate, and the master tree of J-infinity phi can grow unhindered. Between domains, separated by sigma, smoothness may fail, but new kinds of structure become possible. This is how a continuous field can support discrete, countable structures. The positions and arrangements of sigma sets can act like labels for different configurations. How many times a field winds around the sigma line, how many sigma points lie inside the loop, or how many layers are separated by a sigma surface, can all become integer-valued quantities. These integers are topological invariants, numbers that do not change under smooth deformation. They are the first hints of how particles, charges, and other discrete objects can arise from a continuous underlying language. So sigma, far from being just a flaw or a failure, becomes the organizer of complexity. It is the grammar boundary that allows the smooth story to be partitioned into meaningful chapters and characters. Stability and falsifiability. Defects as boundaries. This brings us to a powerful test. The abstract concept of sigma makes a prediction. If there are physical defects in reality, things like vortices, domain walls, cosmic strings, or certain particle-like excitations, they should correspond to these sigma boundaries where the smooth phi field becomes non-smooth. Imagine a measurement scenario. We observe a stable physical defect, something that persists over time. It might be the core of a quantized vortex in a superfluid, the center of a dislocation in a crystal, or a region in spacetime where curvature seems to blow up. We build a phi-based model for the system. Perhaps phi is an order parameter in condensed matter, or a phase-like field related to spacetime structure. Stability for our idea of sigma occurs if the observed defect aligns naturally with the sigma set in the model. In other words, when we track where the smoothness of phi genuinely fails, those locations match where the physical defect lives. The tear in the story corresponds to a special structure in the world. The abstract grammatical boundary meets a concrete physical boundary. Falsification would look very different. Suppose we found stable physical defects that, according to our best phi model, sit in regions where phi is perfectly smooth and all derivatives behave well. Suppose the positions of these defects have no relation to any breakdown of differentiability, no special integrability failure, no topological obstruction. They would be smooth defects, objects that appear as distinguished in physics but not in the grammar of phi. That would mean our concept of sigma is incomplete or misapplied. We would need either a richer notion of grammatical boundary or a different underlying language. This test is important because it ties a very abstract, almost philosophical concept, the boundary of smooth speakability, to tangible, measurable structures. It says, if your description is right, the cracks in your equations and the cracks in the world should coincide. 8. Examples across scales. Let us walk through some intuitive examples, purely as analogies and guiding images. In magnetism, the direction of magnetization in a material can be treated as a field. Away from special points, this direction changes smoothly. But at the core of a magnetic vortex, the direction is undefined. All directions circle around that center, and there is no single smooth way to assign one orientation right at the core. That core is a sigma point for the magnetization field. In material science, the positions of atoms in a crystal can be described by a smooth displacement field that tells you how each atom is shifted from some ideal grid. Around the dislocation line, however, if you march around the loop and come back to your starting point, the displacement field does not return to its original value. There is an unavoidable closure failure. To make sense of this, you must accept that along the dislocation line itself, the displacement field is not smoothly defined. That line is a sigma curve. In fluid dynamics, consider a simple vortex in a two-dimensional flow. The velocity field circulates around the center. Everywhere except at the exact center, the flow can be described smoothly. At the center, if you try to assign a velocity, you quickly run into trouble. Either it becomes unbounded in simple models, or it is simply not well defined. That center point is a sigma point for the velocity potential. In each of these examples, there is a smooth story that fails at a core, line, or surface. The failure is not random, it is structured. It organizes the surrounding flow, pattern, or field. 9. Recognition skill, feeling the edge. How can you develop an intuition for sigma in everyday life? You do not need equations. You can simply look for the places where smooth patterns concentrate, twist, or abruptly end. Watch a whirlpool. You see water moving smoothly, following curved paths that make sense everywhere except at the exact center. Your eyes are naturally drawn to that center. That attraction is your intuition noticing a sigma-like region. Look at the grain patterns in wood or stone. Lines flow elegantly, then converge, knot, or abruptly change direction around certain knots or inclusions. Those knots behave like sigma regions for the grain field. Even in human systems, you can see analogies. A country's legal system is like a field of rules spread over its territory. An embassy, a national border, or a special economic zone is a place where that smooth field of rules breaks and a different rule set applies. These are sigma-like boundaries for the law field. The analogy is imperfect, but it can help your mind feel what it means for a rule system to have edges. The more you look, the more you will notice that many complex patterns are organized by such boundaries. Smooth behavior lives in patches. The borders of those patches do important work. Return to phi, the boundary of the one language. As always, we return to the root. Sigma is not a second substance sitting alongside phi. It is not a rival field. It is a property of phi, a description of where phi's own smooth nature reaches a limit in the language we have built. Starting from one field on a circle, we allowed it to have derivatives. We built an alphabet, a dictionary, and a deep grammar. Now we recognize that for any such field, there will generally be regions where smooth patches cannot be extended globally without tearing. The set of those limiting points is sigma. Sigma, then, is the boundary of the one language. It is how the holophase marks the edges of its own smooth speech. It shows us where new structures can form, where discrete features can emerge, and where topology begins to speak. 11. Remembering our place in the journey. Before we close, let us briefly remember where this fits in our wider climb through the holophase language. Back in the earliest episodes, we learned to say the simplest sentence. There is one field, phi, living on a circle. We saw that when phi begins to change, three dimensions appear at once as echoes. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. We spent many hours learning how every higher derivative is just a finer question about how phi changes, and how each of those questions casts three shadows together in time, space, and motion. We realized that everything we call a thing is really a pattern in this echoing tree. In episode 8, we stepped into a more abstract Platonic realm. We asked, what is this language before it is used to make a specific universe? We met phi as a pure mathematical creature, a function into a circle with shift symmetry. We discovered that its derivatives are not yet frequency or curvature in a physical sense, but pure symbols, letters in an abstract alphabet. We organized those letters into a hierarchy of orders, then collected them at a point into the complete dictionary J infinity phi. We studied constraint relations as grammar, closure under differentiation as the generative engine, and integrability conditions as the test for whether all those derivative words really belong to one underlying phi. Now, by introducing sigma, we have added the first topological ingredient. We have said, even in this pure abstract language, there may be places where smooth speech cannot go. These places are not exceptions we sweep under the rug. They are part of the formal structure. The presence or absence of sigma shapes what kinds of smooth patches can exist, how they can be glued together, and what kinds of loops and knots phi can form. This is crucial for the future of the holophase journey. Later, when we step back down from the abstract and begin to talk about concrete physical phenomena, waves, particles, forces, fields, and information, we will need a way to understand how discrete and stable things can exist in a universe built from one continuous language. Topology, beginning with sigma, will be that way. It will tell us how the single holophase, by allowing certain kinds of grammatical boundaries, can host long-lived, countable structures without ever abandoning its continuous nature. So when you hear S as grammatical boundary, do not think of it as an optional technical detail. Think of it as the first stone in a bridge we are building from pure language to shaped reality. It is the concept that will eventually let us see a particle as a knot in the phi field, a defect in its smooth grammar, a tiny region where the story is forced to jump. And because of that jump, the structure becomes resilient and memorable. In a moment, we will leave this part and continue our climb. But carry this image with you. Phi as a great continuous fabric of phase, derivatives as the threads of its weave, J infinity phi as the full pattern at each point, and sigma as the stitched edges, holes, and seams that give the fabric its overall form. A perfectly smooth, edgeless sheet would be mathematically simple, but it would have nowhere to hook structure. By allowing boundaries, phi allows meaning to crystallize. 12. A gentle practice, listening for boundaries. To make this less abstract, let me offer you a practice you can try in your ordinary life. The next time you're outside, pick one continuous experience. For example, the soundscape around you. Cars passing, birds calling, wind moving through leaves, distant voices. Notice how much of what you hear changes smoothly. Volumes rise and fall, pitches glide, noises appear and fade in ways that your mind can follow without shock. Here, your nervous system is acting like a phi detector, intuitively tracking derivatives. How loud now? How fast that loudness changes? Whether the pattern is accelerating or calming. Now, Listen for edges. Perhaps there is a sudden car horn, a door slamming, a phone ringing sharply. These are human-made analogs of sigma, places where the smooth flow of sound is broken by jump. Your body reacts differently there. You become alert, because the usual smooth grammar of the environment has been interrupted. You can do the same visually. Follow the smooth line of a river or a road with your eyes. Then notice where it abruptly ends, bends sharply, or disappears behind a building. Your visual cortex is extraordinarily sensitive to such boundary points. It highlights them automatically. Without using any equations, your brain is tracking something like sigma for the field of what you see. This is not physics, but it is training. It teaches you to feel the difference between smooth flow and structural break, between domains and boundaries. Later, when we talk about topological charges and winding numbers, you can return to this simple exercise and remember, underneath the technical language, we are still talking about patterns, flows, and the special points where they refuse to remain smooth. In that way, even the most abstract parts of the holophase language can become grounded in your direct, lived experience. Salam and peace be upon you.